Sorya was 26, full of life, and always chasing excitement. She believed love should be bright, fast, and impossible to ignore. One morning, she saw him in the village square. He was old, with silver hair and deep wrinkles, tending a small stall of flowers. Children ran to him without hesitation, and villagers treated him with quiet respect. Sorya laughed softly. "An old man like you?" she whispered. "Who would ever fall in love with you?" The man smiled gently. "Age is just a number," he said. His voice was calm, kind, and steady. Over the next few weeks, Sorya kept seeing him. He helped villagers quietly, carried heavy baskets, and cared for stray animals. She laughed at him often. "Slow down! You'll never catch up," she teased one afternoon. He only smiled. "Better to move carefully than to miss what matters," he said. Despite her teasing, Sorya felt drawn to him. There was a quiet warmth about him, a presence she couldn't explain. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky gold, he took her hand. "Sorya," he said softly, "I want to spend my life with you." "Will you marry me?" Sorya froze. An old man asking her to marry him? She wanted to laugh, to run, to say no, and yet she felt something in her chest she couldn't ignore. "Yes," she whispered. They were married quietly. At first, Sorya laughed at him constantly, teasing him about his age, his slow movements, and his old-fashioned ways. But slowly, she began to notice his patience, his kindness, and the quiet strength that no one else seemed to see. She still laughed, but sometimes when she looked at him, she felt a strange curiosity. Who was this man? Really? Years passed. On their 10th anniversary, Sorya had decorated their small home and invited neighbors. She laughed at him openly in front of everyone, joking about his age. He calmly took off his ring. A soft light shimmered around him. Before Sorya's eyes, his wrinkles faded, his silver hair darkened, and his old body became young and strong. Sorya gasped. "How?" He smiled, now young and vibrant, his eyes holding centuries of wisdom. "I let the world see me as old, to find someone who could love me for who I truly am," he said gently. "And you, Sorya, you laughed at me, yet stayed." That courage broke the spell. Sorya sank to her knees, tears in her eyes. She realized love wasn't about youth or appearances. It was about seeing the soul beneath. And the man before her, once old and quiet, had waited all this time for someone who could truly see him. After that night, Sorya could not sleep. She kept staring at him, the young man she had once laughed at. His eyes, once kind and quiet, now sparkled with life and energy. She wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but words failed her. He reached for her hand and smiled. "Do you understand now?" he asked softly. Sorya nodded slowly, tears running down her cheeks. I see it. I was so wrong." For days after, life felt different. The village still noticed their love, but Sorya no longer laughed at him. Instead, she watched him with awe, noticing every small thing, the way he moved, the way he smiled, the way he seemed to know what others needed. Without being asked, they began to spend more time together, not as an old man and young woman, but as two equals. They walked through the village, holding hands, sharing stories, and laughing, not at each other, but at life itself. Sometimes Sorya would glance at the ring that had once hidden his true form. She wondered how many years he had lived, how many secrets he had kept, and how patient he must have been to wait for someone who could love him despite appearances. One afternoon, they went to the river that ran behind the village. Sunlight danced on the water, and birds sang in the trees. He pulled Sorya close. "Do you know why I waited so long?" he asked. Sorya shook her head. "Because true love cannot be forced. It must be chosen freely without fear or greed. You stayed even when you laughed. You saw me for who I am, not what I appeared to be. That is rare, he said, his voice gentle but firm. Sorya's heart swelled. She realized how shallow her laughter had once been. She had thought love was about youth and beauty. But now she understood it was about patience, understanding, and trust. As the years passed, they grew closer than ever. Their love deepened with each passing day. He taught her things she had never noticed about the world: the quiet strength in patience, the beauty in simplicity, the magic that often hides in plain sight. Sorya sometimes wondered if she would ever see him as old again, but it didn't matter. The man she had once laughed at had shown her a world far richer than she had ever imagined, and she loved him, not for appearances, but for the soul she had discovered beneath them. And every time he removed the ring, even for a moment, she felt the same awe she had felt that first night. It was a reminder that true love is not about what the eye can see. It is about what the heart can feel. Life after the transformation was like waking up in a new world for Sorya. Every morning, she watched Elliot move with energy she had never imagined he could have. He was no longer slow and careful in the ordinary way. His movements were confident, strong, and full of purpose. But still, there was the same calm kindness in his eyes that had drawn her to him in the first place. They began to travel together beyond the village. Elliot showed her forests she had never seen, rivers where the water sparkled like glass, and mountains that stretched endlessly into the sky. Everywhere they went, people felt something in him. Children ran to him without fear. Animals approached him with gentle trust, and even strangers offered smiles of respect. Sorya laughed less now, not at him, but with him. She found joy in the quiet moments, the shared glances, and the simple comforts of being together. Yet sometimes she caught him staring at the horizon or at the sky late at night, his expression thoughtful, almost secretive. One evening, while they rested beside a small stream, she asked softly, "Elliot, why did you wait so long to show me?" He smiled, his hand brushing hers. "I needed to know you could see me for who I truly am. Most people fear the unknown or only love what they can touch. I had to find someone patient, someone willing to look past the surface." Sorya leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. I'm glad I stayed," she whispered. He looked at her, a gentle glow in his eyes. "And I am glad you did. You stayed even when you laughed. That made all the difference." Time passed, and their life together grew richer. They built a small home near the edge of the village, where wildflowers bloomed and birds filled the air with song. Sorya often helped him in the garden, planting seeds and tending flowers. She found peace in the quiet work, marveling at the patience and care Elliot put into everything he did. Sometimes, at night, she would catch him removing the ring for a moment. His youthful form would shimmer slightly in the moonlight, and she felt a thrill every time she saw it. She never asked him why he wore it, or what its full power was. Somehow, she knew some mysteries were meant to remain unseen. The villagers noticed the change in their lives too. People whispered about how the old man had become young, how the couple seemed so happy, and how there was something almost magical about Elliot. But none of it mattered to Sorya. She knew the truth, that Elliot was extraordinary, not just because of the ring, but because of who he was, deep inside. Years passed, and Sorya grew to love every part of him. She laughed less at his age, but she sometimes teased him gently, enjoying his quiet patience and the sparkle of mischief in his young eyes. They shared adventures, quiet moments, and challenges together. Every day, she realized more and more that love was not about what you saw, but what you felt. And in Elliot, she had found a love that would never fade. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, Sorya whispered, "Do you ever wish you didn't wear the ring?" Elliot shook his head. "No. Without it, I would never have found you, and without you, none of this would matter." Sorya smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. She felt a deep, steady warmth in her chest, a love that had begun with laughter and grown into something far stronger than she had ever imagined. And in that moment, she knew that she would never laugh at him again, at least not for the reasons she once had. Life continued peacefully for Sorya and Elliot, but small signs reminded them that the world was not always ordinary. One morning, as Sorya watered the flowers in their garden, a stranger approached the house. He was tall, dressed in dark clothes, and his eyes lingered on Elliot with something close to suspicion. "Good morning," Sorya said cautiously. "Can I help you?" The man smiled politely, but said nothing at first. Then, in a low voice, he asked, "Is this Elliot?" Sorya hesitated, sensing something unusual in the man's tone. "Yes," she said. "He's my husband." The man nodded slowly. "I've heard stories about an old man who became young again. People say it's magic." Sorya's heart skipped. She glanced at Elliot, who stood calmly behind her. His eyes met hers briefly, and she saw the same quiet patience there. He didn't speak, but she understood. She took a step forward, blocking the stranger. "Elliot doesn't need explanations," she said firmly. "You've heard rumors." "That's all." The stranger's eyes flicked to Elliot again, then he nodded. "I see. But be careful. Some secrets are dangerous if they fall into the wrong hands." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Sorya and Elliot standing quietly in the garden. Later that evening, Sorya asked, "Do you think someone is trying to find out about the ring?" Elliot smiled gently. "Perhaps. But the ring has never failed me, and it will not fail us. It only reveals itself when it is safe to do so." Sorya nodded, feeling a mix of awe and fear. She realized that while Elliot's youth was a gift, it was also a responsibility, a secret they had to guard carefully. Days turned into months. Sorya and Elliot continued to live quietly, enjoying simple joys like walking by the river, tending the garden, and sharing meals. Yet, she sometimes noticed fleeting moments where Elliot seemed to vanish from sight or move with a speed that startled her. One rainy afternoon, they were returning from the market when a heavy branch fell from a tree onto the path. Before Sorya could react, Elliot moved with lightning speed, catching the branch and holding it safely aside. She gasped, How did you do that?" Elliot smiled, calm as ever. "Some things are easier when you are careful," he said softly. But Sorya noticed the light glimmer on the ring as he moved. It shone faintly, as if acknowledging her astonishment. That night, she lay awake, thinking about all the mysteries surrounding him. She had once laughed at him for being old, never imagining the depth of his power, his patience, or the centuries he must have witnessed. Now, she realized how extraordinary he truly was, and how much she had grown to depend on him, not just for love, but for a sense of wonder that filled her every day. The days that followed were quiet, but filled with small marvels. Elliot would often disappear into the forest and return with strange herbs or plants she had never seen. Animals seemed to recognize him wherever he went. Even villagers began to respect him in ways that made Sorya proud but also cautious. One evening, as they sat by the river watching the sunset, Sorya finally asked the question she had held in her heart for months. "Elliot, how old are you really?" He smiled, a faint glimmer in his eyes. "Older than you can imagine, but the years don't matter. not to those who love and are loved. Sorya leaned against him, feeling the warmth of his body, the calmness of his presence. She realized that love was no longer about appearances or laughter. It was about trust, patience, and the quiet magic of being with someone who understood you completely. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, she knew that whatever secrets Elliot held, whatever powers he possessed, she would face them with him side by side, with love stronger than anything else in the world. Life after the revelation had changed everything for Sorya, though in ways she could not fully explain. Each morning she woke to find Elliot beside her, youthful and vibrant, yet carrying the same calm patience she had always admired. There was a rhythm to their days that she had never known before, a quiet beauty in ordinary moments that now seemed extraordinary simply because they shared them. They walked together through the village, hand in hand, and she began to notice how people's eyes lingered on him in a way that had nothing to do with curiosity and everything to do with respect. Children would run to him, confident in his gentleness, and animals approached him as if they recognized some secret of his nature. It amazed her every time, but she dared not ask too many questions. There were some mysteries she felt she was not yet ready to uncover. Sorya's laughter had changed too. She no longer mocked him for his age, as she had once done, but it came instead as light, warm laughter shared between them, moments of joy that had nothing to do with appearances. Sometimes they would sit together by the river, the water sparkling like silver in the sunlight, and she would watch him skip stones with an ease and precision that made her smile, thinking back to when she had laughed at his slow movements. Now she understood that patience and wisdom often came with quiet power, and that the man before her, once old and seemingly ordinary, possessed a depth she could barely comprehend. Yet, with all his strength and secretive abilities, he never sought attention, never boasted, and never demanded anything of her except her trust and companionship. There were, however, moments that reminded her that his youth and their happiness came with responsibilities she could scarcely imagine. One morning, as they tended the garden together, a stranger appeared at their gate, a tall, sharply dressed man whose eyes lingered on Elliot with suspicion and something darker, something unspoken. He spoke softly, but with authority, asking if this was truly Elliot, the man rumored to have turned young again. Sorya's heart raced as she instinctively stepped forward to shield him, feeling a protective surge she had never known she could possess. Elliot remained calm, his gaze steady, as if he had expected this encounter. The stranger's words hinted at dangers she could not yet understand, warning that some secrets were perilous if discovered by the wrong hands, and then he vanished into the morning mist as quietly as he had arrived. Sorya looked at Elliot, whose calm smile did not waver, and felt a mixture of awe and fear. She realized that the ring he wore, the one that had transformed him, was not just a gift, it was a shield, a weapon, and a responsibility all at once. The following months passed in a blend of serenity and subtle wonder. They explored forests where the sunlight wove golden patterns through the trees, walked along rivers that shimmered with unseen currents, and climbed hills from which the village seemed impossibly small. Everywhere they went, people felt something unusual in Elliot, an aura of quiet power and wisdom that made them instinctively trust him. Yet, it was never ostentatious. It never drew attention to himself unnecessarily. Sorya noticed fleeting moments when he moved faster than humanly possible, catching a falling branch before it could hit her, or rescuing a frightened animal in a blur that left her gasping in astonishment. Every time she glimpsed the faint shimmer on the ring during these moments, her heart would pound, and a mixture of fear and excitement would fill her chest. She had once mocked him for being old, but now she understood that the man she laughed at possessed secrets that no one could easily comprehend, secrets that made him far more extraordinary than she had ever imagined. Yet, despite the magic, despite the whispered rumors that reached their ears from curious villagers, Sorya found her love for Elliot grounded in something far simpler than wonder or awe. She loved him for the small things, the way he always remembered to prepare her favorite tea, the way he listened when she spoke, the quiet humor in his smile. She loved him because despite his powers and secrets, he never forced her into fear or obedience. He only asked for trust, patience, and presence. And in return, he gave her the rarest gift of all, a life filled with both adventure and safety, a life where the impossible seemed ordinary because they shared it together. As the seasons changed, Sorya began to notice that life with Elliot was unlike anything she had ever imagined. Even on ordinary days, there was a quiet rhythm to their existence, a sense of harmony that seemed to hum just beneath the surface of the world. In the mornings, they would walk through the village together, Elliot moving with a strength and grace that belied his earlier appearance. Children ran to greet him, and villagers bowed their heads slightly in respect, as if instinctively recognizing something extraordinary within him. Sorya could not help but feel a swell of pride, though it was mixed with a flicker of unease. She had once laughed at the old man she had married, never imagining that the quiet patience he had shown was the mark of something far greater than herself. There were days when Elliot seemed almost otherworldly. She would catch him standing in the forest, eyes fixed on the horizon, a faint glow flickering around his ring, and she would wonder what thoughts occupied his mind. Sometimes he would vanish for hours, returning with wild herbs or strange flowers she had never seen, each carefully placed in their garden, as if tending not just to plants, but to the world itself. She never asked too many questions, feeling instinctively that some mysteries were meant to remain untouched until the right moment. Even so, she could not deny the thrill of witnessing his subtle power, the way he seemed to bend the world gently around him without ever forcing it. One afternoon, while they were returning from the village market, a sudden storm broke overhead. Rain pelted the cobblestones, and wind whipped through the streets, carrying leaves and debris in its path. Sorya shivered, clutching her shawl around her shoulders, and Elliot took her hand, guiding her carefully. Then, without warning, a tree branch, loosened by the wind, crashed down in front of them. Before Sorya could react, Elliot moved with a speed that left her breathless. He caught the branch with one hand, holding it safely aside, and set her gently behind him. The faint shimmer on his ring caught the light of the storm, and Sorya's eyes widened in shock. How did you do that?" she asked, voice trembling. Elliot's smile was calm, almost tender. "Some things are easier when you are careful," he said softly. But Sorya knew it was more than that. She had married a man who was not merely extraordinary because of the ring. He had lived, observed, and learned in ways she could not comprehend. The magic was there, yes, but it was guided by centuries of patience, wisdom, and understanding that no spell alone could produce. That night, as the storm passed and they sat by the fire in their cozy home, Sorya felt a deep mixture of awe, love, and fear. She realized that while the transformation he had shown her was astonishing, the true wonder lay in Elliot himself, the man who had waited centuries, had hidden his true form, and had endured loneliness for the hope of finding someone who could see him for what he truly was. She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady warmth of his body, and silently vowed that she would never take him or his secret for granted. Over the following weeks, Sorya noticed other subtle hints of his abilities. Animals seemed drawn to him in a way that defied ordinary explanation. Even the most frightened birds would perch nearby without hesitation. She once saw him move through a forest clearing so quietly that not a single leaf seemed disturbed by his passing. At night, when the moon was high and silver light bathed the land, she would sometimes catch a fleeting shimmer from his ring, like a pulse of light responding to the rhythm of his heart. She could sense, without fully understanding, that the ring was not just a symbol of youth. It was a bridge between worlds, a protector of life, and a vessel of the extraordinary patience that had defined Elliot's centuries-long existence. Despite the wonder surrounding him, life with Elliot remained grounded in simple, tender joys. They spent quiet mornings in the garden, afternoons by the river skipping stones, and evenings by the fire sharing stories and laughter that was no longer rooted in mockery, but in shared understanding. Sorya had grown to love the calm steadiness of his presence, the way he seemed to know what she needed before she did, and the gentle way he guided her through the world. She knew, deep in her heart, that the love she felt for him was not merely for his abilities or his magic. It was for the man who had waited for her, patiently, across decades and lifetimes, until she could finally see him as he truly was. And in that quiet, ever-deepening bond, Sorya understood something she had never realized before. True love was not about appearances, nor about age, nor even about the extraordinary. It was about patience, understanding, and trust. It was about sharing life, in all its ordinary and magical moments, with someone who had chosen to see you, not just what you were, but who you truly could become. As the months passed, the world around them began to feel both familiar and strangely new. Villagers still whispered about Elliot, the man who had once been old and now moved with the strength and vitality of youth, but their attention no longer unsettled Sorya. She had grown accustomed to the small marvels of his presence, the way the wind seemed to bend around him, the quiet trust animals placed in him, and the subtle light that sometimes flickered from his ring in moments of need. Yet, despite the peace in their daily lives, there were occasions when the extraordinary nature of Elliot's existence pressed against the edges of their ordinary world, and Sorya found herself both amazed and anxious. One bright morning, as they walked along a forest path that led to a hill overlooking the village, Sorya noticed a figure standing between the trees. At first, she thought it was a villager, but the man's face was unfamiliar, and there was a tension in his posture that set her instincts on edge. He stepped forward slowly, and Sorya's hand instinctively tightened around Elliot's. The stranger's gaze lingered on Elliot, sharp and searching, as though trying to discern something that the ordinary eye could not see. "I've been looking for him," the man said finally, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of urgency. "The one who hides the secret of youth." Elliot's expression remained calm, but Sorya could see the faintest glimmer of something in his eyes, alertness, recognition, caution. He squeezed her hand gently, a silent reassurance before stepping forward to speak. "You've come far," he said softly, "but there is nothing for you to find here." The stranger's eyes narrowed slightly. "I've heard stories. People speak of a man who defies age, who carries power beyond what should exist in this world. I intend to see the truth." Elliot's smile was gentle, yet it carried a weight of authority that made Sorya shiver. "Truth is not always meant for every eye," he said. "Some things must remain hidden, or they become dangerous." The man hesitated, sensing that Elliot was not merely speaking with words, but with a force that radiated silently from him, an unspoken command that warned of consequences. After a long pause, he bowed slightly and retreated, leaving Sorya and Elliot alone in the dappled sunlight of the forest. Sorya exhaled, a mixture of relief and fear flooding through her. Who was that?" she asked, her voice trembling. Elliot looked at her with the same quiet patience that had first drawn her to him. "Someone who searches for what should remain hidden," he said simply. "It is a risk we have always known exists. But as long as we remain careful, there is nothing to fear." Sorya nodded. Though her mind raced, she realized that the world they now lived in was not entirely ordinary. Elliot's abilities, the magic of his ring, and the centuries he had lived placed them in a place between the normal and the extraordinary, where some people might see wonder and others danger. She had once mocked him for being old, never imagining the depth of his secret life, the patience required to guard it, or the strength it took to survive with such power concealed. And now, with the knowledge that there were those who sought him, she understood the responsibility that came with loving him. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet tension of that encounter lingered in the edges of Sorya's mind. Yet, life continued, and in the comfort of their home, the mundane and the magical intertwined seamlessly. Elliot would often disappear for hours, returning with strange herbs, unusual flowers, or small animals that seemed to have sought him out instinctively. Sorya marveled at these things, sometimes secretly wishing she could fully understand them, but more often simply grateful for the life they had built together, a life where she could feel both the safety of love and the thrill of the unknown. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and bathed their home in golden light, Sorya watched Elliot remove his ring for a moment. His youth shimmered faintly, catching the light of the setting sun, and her heart raced, as it always did. She had never seen anyone carry such quiet power with such gentleness. She stepped closer and took his hand. "You've lived so long, and yet you make the world feel new," she said softly. Elliot's gaze met hers, warm and steady. "It is not the years that make life extraordinary," he said. "It is the people we share it with." "You have changed every day of my life, Sorya. You have given me the courage to be myself, fully, without fear." Her chest tightened, and she felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She had once laughed at him for being old, had teased him endlessly, and yet here she stood, seeing not just his youth or his magic, but the heart of the man she loved more than life itself. And in that quiet golden light, she understood that no matter what challenges awaited them, no matter what dangers or curious strangers might cross their path, she would face them with him, side by side, with love that had been tempered by patience, laughter, and the extraordinary magic of a man who had waited centuries for someone like her. The first real test of their lives together came on a quiet morning when the village seemed to breathe, with an ordinary calm that made Sorya almost forget the strange magical world that Elliot inhabited. They had set out early, walking along the hills beyond the forest, where wild flowers painted the slopes in shades of gold and violet. Elliot moved with ease, his steps confident and purposeful, while Sorya kept pace, feeling a mixture of admiration and awe at the vitality he now possessed. The air smelled of wet earth and blossoms, and for a moment she allowed herself to believe that their lives might remain simple and peaceful forever. But the peace was fragile, and the world outside their home had its own way of intruding. Far ahead, in the shadow of the trees, Sorya noticed movement, subtle, deliberate in a way that made her chest tighten. A group of figures emerged slowly, cloaked and quiet, their eyes fixed on Elliot with an intensity that sent chills down her spine. Before she could warn him, one of them stepped forward, a tall figure whose presence seemed to command the others, and called out, "Elliot! You know what you carry is not meant for the world. It must be returned." Elliot stopped and turned slowly, his calm expression never faltering, though Sorya noticed the faintest tension in his posture. "I have carried it for centuries," he said quietly, "not to wield it recklessly, but to protect it. And those who cannot protect themselves, it will not be taken from me lightly." The leader of the group frowned, stepping closer, and Sorya felt a sudden, instinctive fear clutch her heart. The ring on Elliot's finger seemed to glimmer faintly, as though sensing danger. She had seen it shine before, but never like this, with a pulse almost alive, responding to the threat. Without thinking, she moved closer to him, wrapping her arm around his waist, feeling the steady strength of his presence calm her trembling body. "You don't understand," the figure said sharply. "That ring holds power beyond your comprehension. It can alter life itself, and those who possess it alone risk destruction." Elliot's voice was soft, but it carried an authority that seemed to ripple through the air. "I have understood more than you can imagine," he said, "and I have waited centuries to find someone who could love me, even knowing what I carry. That is why I wear it, and why it will not be taken from me." The strangers hesitated, uncertainty flickering in their eyes, as if Elliot's calm presence, his quiet power, and the shimmering light of the ring weighed heavier than any threat they could make. Sorya could feel the tension in the air, like electricity before a storm, and she realized that this was the first time she truly understood the gravity of the man she had married. He was not merely extraordinary because of his youth or his patience. He was extraordinary because of the life he had lived, the strength he had cultivated, and the quiet, unwavering control he held over forces she could barely imagine. Then, without warning, Elliot moved. It was not fast, not in the way that startled the eye, but it was precise, controlled, and powerful. The ground beneath the strangers seemed to shift slightly, almost as if bending to his will, and the glimmer of his ring flared brighter. The leader of the group stumbled back, eyes wide, and for the first time Sorya saw fear in a human face directed at Elliot. He did not raise his voice, did not strike them, and yet the air around them seemed charged, a silent command that warned them of consequences beyond comprehension. Sorya's heart pounded, but amidst the fear, she felt a deep awe. She had married this man thinking she was laughing at an old, ordinary life, and now she saw the truth. Elliot was a force shaped by centuries, tempered with patience, and bound to a secret so profound that it could reshape the world. And yet, despite all this, he had chosen to live simply, to love her, and to protect life quietly, without ever boasting. When the strangers finally withdrew, retreating into the forest with cautious steps, Elliot turned to Sorya. His eyes held a softness, a warmth that belied the power he had just demonstrated. "Do you see now," he said gently, "why patience and understanding matter? Why laughter alone is never enough?" Sorya nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "I see it," she whispered. "I see everything. And I am not afraid anymore." He smiled, taking her hand in his. "Fear is only natural," he said. "But love can give courage beyond what you imagine. That is why I waited for you." As they walked back to the village, Sorya realized that their lives had changed irreversibly. The world beyond the ordinary had touched them, had tested them, and had revealed that the extraordinary was not merely a secret of Elliot's magic, but a shared responsibility. And for the first time, she felt the weight of her own courage, the strength of her love, and the deep certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. two souls bound by patience, trust, and a force far greater than either could have imagined when they had first met. The days after the encounter in the forest were quiet on the surface, but beneath that calm, a sense of tension lingered, like the slow hum of a storm gathering far away. Sorya could feel it in the way the villagers looked at Elliot, curious, awed, and slightly fearful. The memory of the strangers had not faded from her mind, nor had the image of the ring flaring with light as if alive, responding to the unseen currents of danger. Elliot noticed her unease without needing to ask, and he held her hand more often, guiding her through the mundane tasks of life with a quiet patience that calmed her racing heart. One afternoon, they set out for the hills beyond the village, the sky overcast with clouds that promised rain. Sorya had grown used to their walks, to the rhythm of Elliot's movements, and to the sense of security that came from being near him. Yet, even as she admired the way he moved with confidence and grace, she could not shake a sense of anticipation, a whisper at the edge of her mind, warning her that the calm would not last. Their path led them into a part of the forest they rarely visited, a place where the trees grew close together, their branches entwining like protective arms, and the air felt cooler, heavier, charged with an almost imperceptible energy. Sorya noticed how Elliot slowed his steps slightly, scanning the shadows with a careful precision that made her realize he was not merely walking with her, but guarding her. She felt the thrill of both fear and admiration. Even now, after all she had seen of his abilities, she could not fully grasp the depth of his power or the centuries of experience behind it. Without warning, a sudden movement in the underbrush caught their attention. Dark figures emerged from the shadows, silent, fast, and deliberate. Sorya's heart leapt into her throat as she recognized the same strangers from weeks before, the ones who had spoken of the ring, of power, and of consequences that could befall those who possessed it. They had come back, and this time there was no hesitation in their approach. Elliot stepped in front of Sorya, his calm expression masking the readiness in his posture. The ring on his finger caught the filtered light of the forest, glowing faintly as if aware of the threat and responding to it. Sorya felt a pulse of warmth from his hand, the kind of steady reassurance that made her believe, without question, that he could protect her from anything. "You shouldn't have returned," Elliot said softly, his voice carrying in the stillness of the forest, yet commanding enough that the intruders paused. "Whatever you seek, you will not find here." The leader of the group, a tall man with sharp eyes, advanced a step. "We know what you hide. That ring, that power. It belongs to the world, not to you alone. Surrender it or face the consequences." Elliot's hand rose slightly, and the air seemed to shift around them. The leaves on the trees trembled, and the shadows stretched and twisted, moving almost as if alive. Sorya gasped, clutching his arm, feeling the subtle vibration of his power through her own body. In that moment, she realized that Elliot's abilities were not just a force. They were a presence that could command nature itself, that could bend the ordinary world to protect what he cherished. "Stay behind me," he whispered, and Sorya obeyed, her heart pounding, her breath quickening. Then, almost imperceptibly, the light of the ring flared brighter, spreading in a gentle wave that made the intruders stumble back, shielding their eyes. Elliot moved, not with speed that would alarm, but with precision and authority, and the forest seemed to obey him. A branch shifted to block one path, the ground tilted subtly beneath another, and the strangers, despite their determination, found themselves trapped by forces they could not see, forced to retreat with cautious steps. Sorya's breath came in shaky bursts as she watched, awe and fear mingling in equal measure. She had married a man she once laughed at, An old man she had mocked, and now she saw the truth. He was extraordinary, powerful, and patient beyond measure. And yet, through it all, he had never let that power define him. He used it only to protect, to guide, to ensure that those he loved remained safe. When the strangers finally withdrew into the deeper forest, Elliot turned to Sorya, his eyes softening with a warmth that made her feel both relief and love. "Do you understand now?" he asked quietly. "Why I waited so long? Why patience and courage matter more than power alone?" Sorya nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I see it," she whispered. "I understand everything, and I will never doubt you again." Elliot smiled, lifting her hand to his lips. "You have never doubted me, not truly. Even when you laughed, you stayed. That is the courage that matters." As they walked back toward the village, the sky opening to a soft drizzle, Sorya realized that their lives had changed irreversibly. The world beyond their quiet home held dangers and mysteries she could scarcely imagine, but she also knew that with Elliot by her side, they could face anything together. She no longer laughed at him for being old, nor did she fear the unknown. She had married a man who had waited centuries to be fully seen, and in return, he had chosen to share that extraordinary life with her. In the calm that followed the storm, Sorya felt a deep, unshakable certainty. No matter what lay ahead, she would face it with him, side by side, bound by love, trust, and the quiet, enduring magic of a life shared fully and fearlessly. The days following the forest confrontation carried a quiet tension that clung to Sorya like morning mist. The villagers went about their routines, unaware of the dangers that had brushed so close to their lives, and Elliot maintained his calm, as though the world around them had not shifted at all. Yet Sorya could feel the subtle hum of energy in the air, a reminder that the life they shared was no longer entirely ordinary. Even in the smallest details, how the animals approached them, how the wind seemed to shift when Elliot passed, or how the sun gleamed against his ring, she sensed that their world was alive, with forces she had only glimpsed. She had once laughed at the old man she married, mocking his age and slow ways. But now, every glance at him filled her with awe and reverence. He was patient, strong, and gentle, yet she understood more and more with each passing day that beneath that calm exterior lay centuries of experience and a power she could barely comprehend. One evening, as they walked along a winding path leading to a secluded hilltop overlooking the valley, Sorya noticed a faint light glimmering between the trees. Her chest tightened, a familiar unease filling her, and she instinctively reached for Elliot's hand. "Do you feel that?" she whispered. Elliot's gaze swept the forest carefully. "Yes," he replied softly. "There are those who seek what I protect, those who do not understand the cost of power. But we will face them together." The light in the trees grew brighter, and soon figures emerged, more numerous than the last time, moving with a silent, determined purpose. These intruders were different. Their eyes held no fear, only resolve, as if they believed themselves entitled to take what Elliot guarded. Sorya's heart pounded, but she did not falter. She had learned, in the weeks since discovering Elliot's true self, that courage often came from the heart, not from strength alone. Elliot stepped forward, the glimmer of the ring pulsing faintly on his finger. He did not raise his voice, but the air around him seemed to shift, a subtle vibration that made the approaching figures hesitate. "You do not understand," he said quietly, yet every word carried the weight of centuries. "The power I wear is not for selfish gain. It is for protection, for balance, and for life itself. Leave now, or face what you cannot endure." The leader of the group, a tall, lean figure with eyes sharp and unyielding, stepped forward. Power like yours cannot be hidden forever, he said. We have come to claim it, and we will not leave without it. Elliot's hand brushed lightly over Sorya's, grounding her with a steady warmth. Stay close, he murmured. Then without a sound, the ring glimmered brighter, and a subtle wave of light spread from his hand, touching the trees, the ground, even the air around them. The intruders stumbled slightly, shielding their eyes, as though the very forest itself had turned against them. Sorya felt a shiver run through her body, the energy of the ring resonating in a way that made her realize it was not merely magic. It was an extension of Elliot himself, a reflection of his will, his patience, and his centuries of wisdom. One of the intruders moved forward anyway, throwing a strange device that hummed with energy toward Elliot. Before it could reach him, Elliot's movements were precise, controlled, almost fluid in their perfection. He deflected the device effortlessly, and with a gesture that seemed almost casual, the ground beneath the intruders shifted, rooting some of them in place and nudging others back without harming them. Sorya gasped, clinging to him, her mind racing with awe and fear. She realized then that the life she had once mocked as ordinary had been anything but. She had married a man who was extraordinary in every sense, whose strength and patience extended far beyond what she could have imagined. As the intruders retreated, finally understanding that they could not overcome him, Elliot turned to Sorya, his young face calm, warm, and infinitely kind. "Do you see now?" he asked. "Why patience, courage, and trust matter more than strength alone? Love alone is not enough to face the world, but together we can endure anything." Sorya pressed her forehead to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I see it," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I understand now, completely." Elliot smiled, resting his hand lightly on hers, and that understanding, that courage in the face of the unknown, that is why I waited for you. I could have shown my power to anyone, but I waited for someone who could see me as I truly am, without fear, without judgment. That someone was you. In the days that followed, Sorya began to notice a new rhythm in their lives. She no longer feared the unknown. She welcomed it, knowing that whatever came their way, she and Elliot would face it together. They explored deeper into the forests, discovering hidden glades and streams, and even animals that seemed drawn to Elliot's presence followed them without hesitation. Every day, Sorya grew more aware of the extraordinary life they shared, not merely because of magic, but because of the patience, wisdom, and love that Elliot carried within him. And as they returned home each evening, the sky painted with the gold and pink of sunset, Sorya realized something she had never known before. The laughter she had once used to mock him had been replaced with a deep, enduring joy. It was no longer about appearances or youth. It was about life, shared fully and fearlessly with the man who had waited centuries to be truly seen, and who had chosen her to share the extraordinary journey of his life. The weeks that followed the final confrontation were quieter, though never entirely ordinary. The village resumed its rhythms, the sun rising and falling over the fields and hills, yet Sorya and Elliot both felt the subtle awareness that their lives had changed forever. The intruders had retreated, but the encounter had revealed the truth. The power Elliot carried was not merely his own. It was a force that could attract both wonder and danger, a reminder that the extraordinary could not remain hidden forever. Despite the risks, life with Elliot settled into a new harmony, richer and deeper than Sorya could have imagined. They spent their days walking through forests that now felt like friends rather than wilderness, discovering hidden streams where the water gleamed like silver, and sitting beneath ancient trees whose branches seemed to bow in quiet respect. Every day, Sorya felt more attuned to the subtle magic around them, a reflection of Elliot's careful patience and the centuries of knowledge he carried. She no longer feared the unknown. Instead, she embraced it, knowing that, with him by her side, no challenge could ever truly overwhelm her. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Elliot removed his ring once more. The familiar shimmer of youth touched the air, and Sorya felt the thrill she always felt. The reminder that the man she had once laughed at was extraordinary in ways she could never have imagined. She stepped closer, placing her hands gently on his chest. "Do you ever tire of waiting?" she asked softly, her voice full of curiosity and awe. Elliot smiled, eyes warm and steady. "I have waited centuries," he said quietly, "and yet, in all that time, I never regretted it, because waiting for the right person, someone who could see me fully, was worth every moment. You are that person, Sorya. You always have been." Tears filled her eyes, but they were not tears of fear or regret. They were tears of understanding, of love, of awe at the extraordinary life she now shared. "I don't deserve you," she whispered. Elliot chuckled softly, resting his forehead against hers. "You see yourself too small," he said. "You stayed even when you did not understand. You loved me even when you thought you were mocking me. That is more than enough." As night fell, they sat together beneath the stars, the gentle hum of the village below, blending with the distant songs of the forest. Sorya rested her head against Elliot's shoulder, feeling the steady warmth of his body and the quiet power that flowed through him. In that moment, she realized that love was not about youth, appearances, or even power. It was about patience, trust, understanding, and the courage to stand together, no matter what the world might bring. The days that followed brought peace unlike any they had known. Elliot no longer needed to hide his abilities, not because the world had changed, but because Sorya had grown to understand them, to trust them, and to share in them. They built a life that balanced ordinary joys with the extraordinary: quiet mornings in the garden, afternoons exploring hidden glades and rivers, evenings by the fire sharing stories, laughter, and the simple, profound magic of being together. Years passed, but the love between them remained timeless. Sorya no longer remembered the old days of mockery or fear. All that remained was the man she had come to know fully, whose patience and courage had shaped the life they shared. And Elliot, for his part, continued to carry his secret power with gentle grace, not for glory or dominion, but for love, the love that had waited centuries to be found and had finally been chosen freely, without hesitation, without fear. One quiet morning, as the sun rose over the hills and painted the sky in warm gold, Sorya looked at Elliot, youthful, strong, and steady as ever. She smiled, a full, radiant smile that carried both joy and gratitude. "I never laughed at you again," she said softly. Elliot's eyes sparkled, reflecting the first light of dawn. "No," he said, taking her hand in his, "and I never stopped loving you, not for a moment. That is what makes us stronger than anything else. Our love, patient, enduring, and true." Together they walked into the day, the forest and village stretching endlessly around them, a world filled with both ordinary beauty and quiet, enduring magic. And in that world, Sorya knew, at last, that she had found something far more extraordinary than youth or power. She had found a love that would never fade, a life shared fully and fearlessly, and a man who had waited centuries to be truly seen, and finally was.